Hello and welcome for all of you who are tuned in. You're watching TMH as we present you our daily English news. Our headlines for today include the UN telling Ethiopia in January that a school that was hit in an airstrike housed displaced people. New study shows babies in Ethiopia's Tigray region are dying at 4 times per war levels, and the Renew Europe group in the European Parliament calls for sanctions against perpetrators of the human rights violations on the ongoing war on Tigray's region. As we move on to our main updates for today, the UN told Ethiopia in January that a school that was hit during an airstrike housed displaced people during this conflict. According to a copy of the letter seen by Reuters that was verified by an aid worker and 2 UN sources, the school hit by an airstrike in northern region of Ethiopia on Tuesday was on a list of sites housing displaced persons that United Nations sent to Ethiopia and the government in January. More than 65 people who were killed and many more wounded in the drone strikes in the town of Adidaro on Wednesday, and the second one within just this week alone. Ethiopian government spokesperson, Lagasa Tulu military spokesperson, Colonel Getaneth Adana, and the Prime Minister spokesperson, Bilene Siyom, did not respond to the requests for comment about the letter or the airstrikes, and the government has previously denied targeting any civilians as well. Demeke Mekonnen, who's Ethiopia's deputy prime minister and foreign minister, did not respond to requests for comment, and the ministry spokesperson, Medles Alem, said the issue was not a diplomatic matter, and he could therefore not comment on any situation as well. As we move on to our next update, a new study shows babies in Ethiopia's Tigray region are currently dying at 4 times per war levels, according to the most sweeping study yet on the impact of the war, as well as the siege and the mothers and the children that are extremely affected by this ongoing conflict. Babies in the Tigray region are dying in the first month of life at 4 times the rate before the war, and cut off access to the most medical care for over 5 million people. Women are dying during pregnancy or even within the 42 days of giving birth at 5 times the rate prior to the war, and children under 5 are dying at twice the pre-war rate, often because of easily preventable reasons, and according to the yet unpublished study shared by its authors with the Associated Press. Now, almost 2 years have passed since the war started, and Ethiopia's government isolated the entire Tigray region from the rest of the world, severing basic services such as electricity, phone, internet, and banking included. United Nations backed investigators last month, saying that the Ethiopian government is using starvation of their civilians as a tactic and a weapon of war, and Tigray is one of the worst man-made humanitarian crises in the world currently, as the European Union foreign policy chief alluded to on Thursday. The Renew Europe group in the European Parliament has called for sanctions against the perpetrators of human rights violations in the war on Tigray. The Renew Europe group, in an urgent resolution on the recent humanitarian developments within the Tigray region of Ethiopia, most notably that of children, requested by the parliamentary body's political group and yesterday's approved by the plenary, strong condemned the use of starvation as a method of warfare. We call on the EU and its member of states to adapt sanctions against perpetrators of human rights violations through the European Magnitsky Act, as the resolution said, and it also called for urgent, unrestricted humanitarian access to all of those affected by the conflict within the region, and must be granted immediately as well. The resolution added that the peace must prevail, and those responsible for the war and all of the atrocities committed should also be held accountable. It welcomed the willingness of all Tigrayan and federal Ethiopian authorities to enter a peace negotiation under the leadership of the African Union, and called for an immediate cessation of fire and a resumption of humanitarian truce as well. Renew Europe member of European Parliament, John Christopher, co-president of Renew PAC and the member of EU-ACP Joint Parliamentary Assembly, said that the findings of the latest UN resolution on the human rights situation show that Ethiopia is at the crucial turning point currently, saying there is a true humanitarian and human rights crisis taking place in North Ethiopia currently, one that is epic proportions and which will have lasting consequences on the entire region. He also called on the belligerent parties to take their responsibility and use these negotiations to reach a lasting and inclusive, peaceful solution. This is a crucial effort for the first step in reaching reconciliation, but it is only the first step, he said, saying that the future stability and the generation of Ethiopia depends on them entirely. Alex de Waal of the World Peace Foundation says diplomatic channels to address the war in Ethiopia pretty much at a dead end currently. Professor Alex de Waal told Tigrai Channel the mediation led by what he dubbed an extremely legatio, clearly impartial General Olusegun Obasanjo has failed at his mission. Let's take a listen.
The African Union has essentially been captured by the government in Addis Ababa. We always knew it would not have much autonomy from its host country, which can put a great deal of pressure on it. And that is what we've seen. We've seen General Olusegun Obasanjo in post as the High Representative of the African Union Commissioner for 13 months, during which time he has not managed to achieve a single face-to-face meeting between the parties. He has been extremely lackadaisical, clearly partisan, and the suspicion lingers that his agenda is really to smooth the way for the Ethiopian government, hand in hand with the state of Eritrea, to impose a settlement on Tigray at the point of a gun. This reality was, I think, recognized by the United States. But the US efforts have been extremely low-level and half-hearted. And they've been even lower level and less than half-hearted since the war in Ukraine began. So the issue of the war in Ethiopia has essentially been delegated to the Africa Department in the Department of State, where it has not been handled in an energetic, impartial, or even professional manner. And one of the consequences of that is that the preliminary understandings, even agreements that were reached between the government of Tigray and the federal government of Ethiopia in meetings, face-to-face meetings facilitated by the United States, have not been kept. The promises have been broken, and there has been no penalty on the government of Ethiopia for breaking those promises. So at the moment, the diplomatic channels are pretty much at a dead end. The African Union is talking about inviting the parties to peace talks in South Africa in about a week's time. But there's no evident serious preparation for those peace talks, and it will be very surprising to me if they're handled in an impartial, credible, robust, serious manner.
Alex de Waal lastly mentioned that Ethiopian government's monopoly of violence is now in the hands of the Eritrean government, and that the major trends show that Ethiopia is careening towards being a failed state. Our final update for today: Abiy Ahmed's government has in fact agreed to peace talks, and Ethiopia's federal government says it has accepted an invitation to attend the peace talks mediated by the African Union. In a later date, on the 1st of October 2022, African Union Commission Chairperson Musa Faki invited leaders of the Tigray region and the federal government to talks on Sunday on the 8th of October 2022 to be held in South Africa. Redwan Hussein, who's the National Security Advisor of the Prime Minister, wrote on the Twitter account that the government has accepted this invitation, which is in line with our principled position regarding the peaceful resolution of the conflict and the need to have talks without any preconditions. The government of Tigray yesterday did respond, expressing its readiness as well to send its negotiators to the talks, but asked for clarifications on the substantive and procedural aspects of the ongoing process. Eritrea's hardline position, however, could be a stumbling block moving forward, and the Tigray War is the world's current bloodiest conflict that has spawned on the worst ongoing humanitarian catastrophic on the entirety of this earth. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.